The observation vessel moved quietly through the darkness of space. Commander Zoroth stood at the center of the bridge, his pale gray hands folded behind his back. His large black eyes watched the viewscreen as a small blue planet grew larger with each passing moment. Earth. He had heard stories about this world since he was a child. Every Vetheri knew about the primitive planet that had been marked for future use. 3,000 years had passed since the Dominion last visited this corner of the galaxy. Back then, the scouting teams had found nothing of interest. Just a young species still learning to walk upright, still fighting with rocks and sharpened sticks. The reports described them as violent, short-lived, and destined for extinction. The Council had decided to wait. Let the creatures destroy themselves. Then harvest the planet for its water and minerals. But waiting had taken longer than expected. The Dominion had other matters to attend to. Wars with neighboring empires. Resource shortages on the homeworld. Political disputes that lasted centuries. Earth had been forgotten, left to rot in the records of some forgotten archive now. Zoroth was here to finally claim what belonged to the Dominion. Lieutenant Navarra sat at the science station, her four-fingered hands moving across the glowing controls. She was young, barely 200 years old, and this was her first deep space assignment. Her silver hair was pulled back in the traditional military style, and her gray skin was smooth and unmarked by age. "Commander, I am getting strange readings from the planet," she reported. Her voice carried a note of confusion. Zoroth turned toward her. "What kind of readings?" "The atmosphere has changed significantly since our last recorded visit. Oxygen levels are higher. Pollution markers are lower than expected. And there are unusual energy signatures coming from the surface." Zoroth frowned. This was not what he had anticipated. According to the old projections, the planet should be a wasteland by now. The humans should have poisoned their own air and water long ago. That was what primitive species always did. "Perhaps our instruments need adjustment," he suggested. "Run the scan again." Navarra did as ordered. The results came back the same. Science Officer Corvin, an older male with deep lines across his face, walked over to study the data. He had served the Dominion for over 500 years and had seen many strange things in his time. But even he seemed puzzled. "These readings make no sense," Corvin muttered. "There are structures on the surface. Large structures. And they appear to be generating power." "Ruins," perhaps Zoroth said. "The remains of whatever civilization they managed to build before their collapse." Corvin shook his head slowly. "No, Commander. These structures are active. I am detecting heat signatures, movement, communication signals. Whatever is down there, it is very much alive." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Zoroth felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Land on the abandoned planet, establish a colony outpost, and send word back to the homeworld. There was not supposed to be anyone here. "Bring us closer," Zoroth ordered. "I want visual confirmation." The vessel descended through the upper layers of the atmosphere. Clouds parted around them like curtains being drawn back, and then they saw it. Cities. Massive, gleaming cities that stretched across the landscape. Towers of glass and metal that reached toward the sky. Lights burning in patterns that suggested roads, highways, transportation networks, and ships. Hundreds of ships moving through the air and beyond it, climbing into space with casual ease. Navarra gasped softly. "By the Ancient Ones. What happened here?" Zoroth could not answer. He stood frozen, staring at the impossible scene before him. The primitive creatures they had dismissed as irrelevant had built all of this. In 3,000 years, they had gone from stone tools to starships. It was not possible. "It should not be possible," Commander Corvin said quietly. "We need to leave. Now, before they detect us." Red warning lights flashed across every console. Navarra's hands flew across her controls as she tried to make sense of the incoming data. "Two vessels approaching at high speed," she reported. "They are much faster than us. I cannot outrun them." Zoroth watched the view screen as two sleek shapes appeared on either side of their observation vessel. The human ships were angular and aggressive, built for combat rather than study. Weapons systems glowed along their hulls, ready to fire at a moment's notice. A voice crackled through the communication system. It spoke in a language the translation matrix struggled to process. But after a few seconds, the words became clear. Unidentified craft, you have entered protected airspace. Identify yourselves immediately, or you will be escorted to a holding facility. This is your only warning. Navarra looked at Zorath with wide, frightened eyes. Commander, what do we do? Zorath had no answer. In all his years of service, he had never faced a situation like this. The Velthari Dominion was one of the oldest powers in the known galaxy. They did not surrender. They did not bow to lesser species, but looking at those human ships, at the weapons pointed directly at his vessel, Zorath understood something terrible. The humans were not a lesser species anymore. They had become something else entirely. Something dangerous. Open a channel, he said finally. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Tell them we come in peace. Tell them we did not expect to find their world inhabited. Navarra transmitted the message. There was a long pause, stretching out for what felt like an eternity. Then a different voice responded, deeper and calmer than the first. Velthari. We know that name. Our historians have records of your visit. You will land at the coordinates we are transmitting. Deviation from the flight path will result in immediate action. Do you understand? We understand, Zorath replied. The human ships escorted them down through the atmosphere. As they descended, Zorath could see more of the world below. Forests and oceans, mountains and plains, but also farms and factories, research stations, and military installations. The humans had spread across every corner of their planet and beyond. Corvin moved to stand beside him. The Council will need to know about this, the old scientist said quietly. Everything we believed about this species was wrong. Zorath nodded slowly. Yes, we made a terrible mistake 3,000 years ago. We looked at these creatures and saw only what we expected to see. We never considered that they might surprise us. The shuttle touched down on a landing platform surrounded by armed soldiers. Through the viewport, Zorath could see at least 40 of them, each carrying weapons he did not recognize. A woman stepped forward from the group, her dark hair pulled back tightly. Her uniform decorated with symbols of rank and authority, she looked up at the Velthari vessel with an expression that was impossible to read. Welcome back to Earth, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the external sensors. You have been gone a very long time. We have much to discuss. Commander Zorath took a deep breath and prepared to face the consequences of his ancestors' arrogance. The Dominion had come to claim a dead world. Instead, they had found an empire waiting for them. And he had the terrible feeling that this was only the beginning. The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss. Commander Zorath stepped out first, his boots touching human soil for the first time in his long life. The air was clean and cool, carrying the scent of growing things that he did not recognize. Behind him, Lieutenant Navarra and Science Officer Corvin followed in silence. The armed soldiers watched them with steady eyes. Their weapons remained lowered but ready. Zorath noticed that they showed no fear, no hesitation. These were not the scattered tribespeople his ancestors had observed 3,000 years ago. These were trained warriors, confident in their strength. The woman who had spoken earlier approached them. Up close, Zorath could see the lines of experience on her face, the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes. She moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent decades making difficult decisions. I am Admiral Catherine Brooks of the United Earth Coalition, she said. You will come with me. The Council is waiting. Zorath inclined his head respectfully. I am Commander Zorath of the Velthari Dominion. These are my officers, Lieutenant Navarra and Science Officer Corvin. We thank you for your welcome. Admiral Brooks did not smile. Save your thanks, Commander. You have not yet heard what we have to say. She led them across the landing platform and into a large building made of white stone and glass. The corridors were wide and brightly lit. Humans in various uniforms moved past them, some pausing to stare at the strange gray-skinned visitors. Zorath felt their eyes upon him and fought the urge to shrink away. Your people have built impressive structures, he offered, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. Admiral Brooks glanced at him. You expected to find ruins. It was not a question. Zorath did not know how to respond. They entered a transport vehicle that carried them through the city at high speed. Through the windows, Zorath watched the human world pass by. Towers rose on every side, connected by bridges and walkways. Ground vehicles moved along organized roads, while air vehicles hummed overhead. Parks filled with trees and flowers provided spots of green among the gray and silver buildings. "How many humans live on this planet now?" Corvin asked softly. 12 billion on Earth itself, Admiral Brooks replied. "Another 78 billion across our colonies." Navarra made a small sound of disbelief. Corvin's face went pale beneath his gray skin. Even Zorath felt his breath catch in his throat. 90 billion humans. The Dominion's entire population was barely half that. The transport stopped before a massive structure in the center of the city. It was built like a dome, its curved surface covered in windows that reflected the afternoon sun. Guards stood at every entrance, and flags bearing symbols from many different nations flew from tall poles around the perimeter. "This is the Coalition Assembly Hall," Admiral Brooks explained. "The representatives of every human nation gather here to make decisions that affect our entire species. Today, they have gathered to meet you." Inside the assembly chamber was vast and circular. Thousands of seats rose in tiers around a central platform. Every seat was filled. Humans of every age and appearance looked down at the three Svelthari officers as they were led to the center of the room. Zorath had faced enemy fleets in battle. He had negotiated with hostile powers across the galaxy, but he had never felt as small as he did in that moment, standing before the collected representatives of humanity. A man rose from a prominent seat in the front row. He was middle-aged, with graying hair and a serious expression. His voice carried easily through the chamber when he spoke. "I am Senator Daniel Gray, Chairman of the Coalition Security Council. Commander Zorath, do you know why you have been brought before this assembly?" Zorath straightened his spine. "I assume you wish to discuss the nature of our presence in your territory?" Senator Gray shook his head slowly. "No, Commander. We wish to discuss the nature of your intentions. Specifically, the intentions your ancestors expressed 3,000 years ago." A murmur spread through the chamber. Zorath felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "Our historians have been studying the records left behind by your original scouting team," Senator Gray continued. "They were quite thorough in their documentation. Would you like to know what they wrote about us?" Before Zorath could respond, a holographic display flickered to life above the central platform. Strange symbols appeared, clearly Velthari script, followed by a translation in human language. Subject species. Designation: Terran bipeds. Technological level: pre-industrial. No evidence of organized civilization. Aggressive behavior observed between tribal groups. Estimated lifespan of individuals: 40 to 50 standard cycles. Recommendation: Mark. Planet for future resource extraction. Estimated time until species self-termination: 800 standard cycles. The chamber fell silent. Every eye was fixed on Zorath. "There is more," Senator Gray said. "Your scouts also transmitted a secondary recommendation to your homeworld. It suggested that if any members of our species survived, they could be collected and used as manual labor for mining operations." The exact term used was livestock potential. Navarra lowered her head in shame. Corvin closed his eyes. Zorath stood frozen, unable to speak. A woman rose from another section of the assembly. She was younger than Senator Gray, with sharp features and auburn hair. "I am Secretary Maria Delgado, head of the Coalition Diplomatic Corps. Commander, we do not share this information to humiliate you. We share it so that you understand the foundation of our relationship with your species." She walked down to the central platform and stood directly in front of Zorath. Despite being smaller than him, she seemed to tower over him in that moment. "For 3,000 years, your people assumed we would destroy ourselves. You marked our world as property to be claimed whenever you felt ready. You saw us as animals, too primitive to matter." Her voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. "But we did not destroy ourselves, Commander. We grew, we learned. We built ships that can travel between stars. We developed weapons that can crack planets in half. And we did all of this knowing that somewhere out there, someone was waiting to take what was ours. Zorath finally found his voice. Secretary, those decisions were made by our ancestors, not by us. The current Dominion Council had no part in those plans. We came here only to explore, not to conquer. Secretary Delgado studied him for a long moment. Perhaps that is true. Perhaps your intentions were peaceful. But you came expecting to find an empty world, did you not? You came expecting that your ancestors' predictions had proven correct. Zorath could not deny it.
The question now,
Secretary Delgado continued, is what happens next. Your vessel has been allowed to send one transmission back to your homeworld. We could have destroyed you the moment you entered our space. We chose not to. Do you understand why? Zorath shook his head. Admiral Brooks stepped forward. Because we want your leaders to know what they are dealing with. We want them to understand that the primitive creatures they dismissed have become something far more powerful than they ever imagined. And we want them to make a choice. What choice? Zorath asked. Senator Gray rose from his seat again. His voice echoed through the silent chamber. The choice between peace and war, Commander. The choice between partnership and destruction. Your Dominion can accept that humanity is no longer beneath them. You can treat us as equals, respect our territory, and work toward mutual benefit. Or you can cling to your old beliefs, your old arrogance, and face the consequences. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. We are giving you the chance to do what your ancestors failed to do. See us clearly, recognize what we have become, and never, ever underestimate us again. The holding facility was comfortable, but clearly designed to contain prisoners. Commander Zorath sat on a simple bed in a small room with white walls and no windows. A single door led to a common area where Navarra and Corvin were also being kept. Guards stood outside at all times, polite but watchful. 7 days had passed since their appearance before the Coalition Assembly. 7 days of waiting, wondering, and worrying about what would come next. The humans had provided food and water, medical care. When Corvin developed a cough from the unfamiliar air, and even reading materials translated into Velthari script, but they had given no indication of when the 3 officers would be released. On the 8th day, Admiral Brooks arrived. She entered the common area alone, no guards accompanying her. Her uniform was crisp, and her expression unreadable. Zorath rose from his seat as she approached. Commander, I have news, she said. Your transmission reached the Dominion homeworld. They have sent a response. Zorath felt his heart rate quicken. What did they say? Admiral Brooks activated a small device in her hand. A holographic display appeared, showing Velthari text that Zorath immediately recognized as official council script. They demanded your immediate release and the return of your vessel. They also stated that any further interference with Dominion operations would be considered an act of war. Zorath closed his eyes. This was exactly what he had feared. The council was too proud to set in their ancient ways to recognize the danger they faced. They do not understand, he said quietly. They cannot see what I have seen. Admiral Brooks studied him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. No, they cannot. They are making decisions based on outdated information and old assumptions, just as your ancestors did when they first visited our world. She sat down in a chair across from him. For the first time, her expression softened slightly. Tell me something, Commander. When you entered our system, what did you expect to find? Zorath was silent for a moment. I expected to find a dead world. Perhaps some surviving wildlife. The ruins of whatever primitive structures the humans had managed to build before their extinction. I expected to establish a small outpost and send word back to the homeworld that the planet was ready for colonization. Now I know that everything I believed was wrong. Your species did not destroy itself. It grew stronger. It became something we never imagined possible. He met her gaze directly. I have walked your cities, Admiral. I have seen your technology, your organization, your determination. If the Dominion goes to war with humanity, we will lose. Admiral Brooks nodded slowly. I believe you understand that. The question is whether you can make your leaders understand it as well.
Oh.
She leaned forward in her chair. We are going to send you home, Commander. You and your officers will be allowed to return to the Dominion with your vessel intact, but you will carry a message with you. Not the official diplomatic response that our council is preparing. A personal message from me to you. What message? Zorath asked. I want you to tell your people what you saw here. Not the statistics, not the military assessments, but the truth of what humanity has become. Tell them about our cities and our ships. Tell them about the assembly chamber and the representatives of every nation on Earth gathered in one place. Tell them that we know what your ancestors planned for us, and that we are not afraid. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at something Zorath could not see. 3,000 years ago, your scouts looked at our ancestors and saw animals. They saw creatures too primitive and too violent to ever amount to anything. And in some ways, they were right. We were violent. We fought each other constantly over land and resources and ideas. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. Now she turned back to face him. But we also learned. Every war taught us something new about ourselves and about survival. Every conflict made us stronger, more adaptable, more determined. The violence that your ancestors expected would destroy us instead forged us into something harder and more resilient than any species you have ever encountered. Zorath listened in silence. He had read the old reports, the confident predictions that humanity would burn itself to ash within a few centuries. Those predictions had been based on sound logic and careful observation, but they had failed to account for something essential about the human spirit. You survived out of spite, he said slowly, the realization dawning on him. Admiral Brooks smiled for the first time. It was not a warm smile, but it was genuine. When our archaeologists discovered the transmissions your ancestors left behind, it changed everything. Suddenly we had proof that someone out there was watching us, waiting for us to fail. Someone who saw us as nothing more than future property. You cannot imagine how that united us. Old enemies became allies. Ancient grudges were set aside. Every nation on Earth agreed that whatever happened, whatever we had to sacrifice, we would never give anyone the satisfaction of proving us worthless. The door opened, and Navarra and Corvan were escorted in. They looked tired and worried, but unharmed. Admiral Brooks acknowledged them with a brief nod. Your vessel is being prepared for departure. You will be given provisions for the journey home and a clear flight path out of our territory. In return, we ask only that you deliver our message honestly. Corvan stepped forward. Admiral, I must ask, what happens if the Dominion rejects your terms? What happens if they choose war? Admiral Brooks met his gaze steadily. Then we will fight, and we will win. Not because we want to destroy your people, but because we refuse to be destroyed. We have spent 3,000 years preparing for the day when someone would come to take what is ours. Your Dominion would not be the first enemy we have faced, and you would not be the last. But you would be the first to have been given fair warning. She walked to the door and paused with her hand on the frame. I have read your service record, Commander Zorath. You are an intelligent officer with a long career of honorable service. I do not believe you want war any more than we do. So when you stand before your council, when you deliver our message, remember what you saw here. Remember the cities and the ships and the soldiers. Remember the 90 billion humans spread across 400 worlds. And then ask yourself whether the Dominion's pride is worth the cost of testing us. She left without another word. The door closed behind her, leaving the three Velthari officers alone with the weight of everything they had learned. Navarra sat down heavily. What do we do now, Commander? Zeroth looked at his officers. They had followed him on this mission, expecting a simple assignment. Instead, they had witnessed the awakening of a power that their entire civilization had failed to predict. We do what the Admiral asked, he said finally. We go home and tell the truth. We show the Council what humanity has become, and we pray that they are wise enough to listen. Corvan shook his head slowly. The Council is not known for wisdom, Commander. They are known for pride and tradition. They have ruled the Dominion for 10,000 years because they never backed down, never showed weakness. Then they will have to change, Zorath replied, because the alternative is extinction. Not ours alone, but theirs as well. The humans have proven that they can do what we thought impossible. If we force them into a war, they will do it again. He looked toward the window, toward the human sky that had once seemed so unremarkable. They will do whatever it takes to survive, and nothing we have will be enough to stop them. The journey back to the Dominion homeworld took 43 days. Zorath spent most of that time preparing his report. Going over every detail of what he had witnessed on Earth, Navarra helped him organize the sensor data and visual recordings. Corvin provided scientific analysis of human technology. Together, they built the most comprehensive assessment of an alien species that any Velthari officer had ever compiled. When the homeworld finally appeared on the view screen, Zorath felt no relief, only dread. The Dominion capital was a massive city that covered most of the central continent. Towers of dark stone rose toward the purple sky, their surfaces carved with the symbols and stories of 10,000 years of history. Ships moved constantly through the air and into orbit, carrying goods and passengers across the empire. It was an impressive sight, a testament to the power and endurance of the Velthari people. But Zorath now saw it with different eyes. He saw the old designs, the traditional methods, the reluctance to change that had defined his civilization for millennia. He saw a people so confident in their own superiority that they had stopped looking for threats. And he knew that this blindness could destroy them all. The observation vessel was directed to land at the military command center. A delegation of council representatives was waiting when Zorath and his officers stepped onto the platform. At their head stood High Counselor Yevith, the oldest and most powerful member of the ruling body. Yevith was ancient, her gray skin wrinkled and marked by centuries of service. She had guided the Dominion through 3 major wars and countless smaller conflicts. Her word was law in all matters of state security. And her expression, as she looked at Zorath, was one of cold displeasure. "Commander Zorath," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you have much to explain. Your transmission has caused great concern among the council." Zorath bowed respectfully. "High Counselor, I understand, but I ask that you reserve judgment until you have seen the full evidence of what we discovered." Yevith's eyes narrowed slightly. "Evidence? You mean evidence that you surrendered to a primitive species without firing a single shot? Evidence that you allowed yourself to be held captive for 8 days while delivering nothing but excuses?" Several of the younger council members behind her nodded in agreement. Zorath recognized Counselor Draven among them, his face twisted with contempt. "With respect, High Counselor, the humans are not primitive. They have not been primitive for a very long time." He activated his personal display unit and projected the visual recordings onto a nearby screen. Images of human cities appeared. Their gleaming towers and organized infrastructure, a stark contrast to anything the council had expected. Ships moved through the sky, demonstrating technology that was clearly advanced. Soldiers stood in formation, their weapons visible and ready. "These recordings were taken during my time on Earth," Zorath explained. "The humans have developed a civilization that rivals our own. Their population exceeds 90 billion across more than 400 colony worlds. Their fleet numbers in the tens of thousands, and they are fully aware of our ancestors' original intentions regarding their planet." Counselor Draven stepped forward. "This is impossible. The projections clearly showed that the humans would destroy themselves within 800 cycles. Our scientists confirmed this assessment." "Our scientists were wrong," Zorath replied simply. The silence that followed was deafening. No one in the Dominion's history had ever suggested that Velthari science could fail so completely. High Counselor Yevith raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to spread through the assembled officials. "Continue, Commander. Tell us everything." Zorath took a deep breath and began his full report. He described the interception of their vessel, the escort to the surface, the meeting with Admiral Brooks. He explained the assembly chamber and the representatives of every human nation gathered in one place. He shared the words of Senator Gray and Secretary Delgado, their calm confidence and their unmistakable warning. When he finished, the chamber was completely silent. Yevith sat in her formal chair, her ancient face unreadable. "You believe these claims? You believe that the humans have truly become what you describe?" "I walked their streets, High Counselor. I breathed their air. I saw their soldiers and their ships with my own eyes. Yes, I believe it. And their message? Their demand that we acknowledge their strength and treat them as equals? Zorath nodded slowly. They were very clear. They want peace, but they are prepared for war. And High Counselor, based on everything I observed, I believe they would win such a conflict. Counselor Draven laughed harshly. This is absurd. The Dominion has ruled this sector of the galaxy for 10,000 years. We have crushed every enemy who dared to challenge us. You expect us to believe that a species we once considered for livestock has somehow become our equal? Not our equal, Zorath said quietly. Our superior. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Several council members gasped. Draven's face went pale with rage. Commander, you forget yourself, Yeveth said, her voice dangerous. I speak only the truth, High Counselor. The humans developed under conditions that we could never have predicted. Their violent nature, which our ancestors expected would destroy them, instead made them stronger. Every conflict taught them new ways to survive and adapt. Every challenge drove them to greater achievements. They built their entire civilization on the foundation of competition and struggle. He stepped forward, his voice growing more urgent. They did all of this knowing that someone was watching. When they discovered the transmissions our ancestors left behind, it unified them as nothing else ever had. They stopped fighting each other and started preparing for the day we would return. They have been waiting for us for tea. Whoa, 100 years, High Counselor. They are ready. Science Officer Corvin stepped forward to support his commander. The data supports Commander Zorath's assessment. Human technology, while different from our own, is no less advanced. In some areas, particularly weapons, systems, and propulsion, they may actually exceed our capabilities. A direct military confrontation would be extremely costly for the Dominion. High Counselor Yeveth sat in silence for a long moment. Her ancient eyes moved slowly across the images still displayed on the screen. The human cities, the human ships, the human soldiers. Leave us, she said finally. All of you except Commander Zorath. The chamber emptied quickly. Even Counselor Draven withdrew without protest, though his expression promised future confrontation. When the doors closed, Yeveth rose from her chair and walked slowly toward Zorath. You have served the Dominion faithfully for 300 years, she said. I have read your record. You are not a coward, and you are not a fool. So I will ask you one question, and I expect an honest answer. Yes. High Counselor, the Council rejects the human terms. If we go to war as Counselor Draven, and others will certainly demand what happens to our people, Zorath met her gaze directly. We die, High Counselor. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps not completely. But the humans will not stop until they have destroyed our ability to threaten them ever again. They are a species forged in conflict. They've been fighting for survival since their earliest days, and they have never, ever given up. He paused, searching for the right words. They told me something before I left. They said that the old Dominion scouts gave them a gift without knowing it. The knowledge that someone out there saw them as worthless, as animals to be used and discarded. That knowledge made them determined to prove themselves. They built their empire on spite, High Counselor. On the absolute refusal to be dismissed. Yeveth nodded slowly. Her expression remained unreadable, but something had changed in her eyes. Thank you, Commander. You have given me much to consider. You are dismissed. Zorath bowed and turned to leave. At the door he paused. High Counselor, may I say one more thing? Speak. The humans could have destroyed our vessel the moment we entered their space. They chose not to. They could have kept us as prisoners indefinitely. They chose not to. Every action they have taken has been designed to give us a chance to make the right decision. They want peace. But if we force them to war, they will show no mercy. He opened the door. Please, High Counselor. For the sake of our people, choose wisely. And then he was gone, leaving the ancient leader alone with the weight of her decision. The council debated for 7 days. Voices were raised, arguments made, threats exchanged. Counselor Draven and his supporters demanded immediate military action, calling Commander Zorath a traitor and a coward. Others, older and perhaps wiser, urged caution. The recordings from Earth could not be denied. The evidence was too clear, too overwhelming to ignore. In the end, High Counselor Yeveth made the decision herself. On the 8th day, she stood before the full assembly and spoke the words that would change the course of Velthari history. The Dominion will accept the human terms. We will acknowledge their sovereignty, respect their territory, and seek a path toward peaceful cooperation. This is not surrender. This is survival. We will adapt to this new reality as we have adapted to every challenge in our 10,000 years of existence. Counselor Draven rose in fury. This is betrayal. You are betraying everything our ancestors built. You are betraying the Dominion itself. Yeveth's voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. I am saving the Dominion, Counselor. Our ancestors made a mistake 3,000 years ago. They looked at the humans and saw only what they expected to see. They did not see the potential, the determination, the sheer stubborn will to survive that would transform those primitive creatures into a power that rivals our own. She gestured toward the images still displayed around the chamber. Look at them, Counselor. Look at their cities, their ships, their soldiers. Look at what they built from nothing, from the stone tools and wooden spears that our scouts dismissed as irrelevant. And then tell me that we should go to war with these people. Draven had no answer. I thought not, Yeveth said. The message has been sent. The humans have accepted our response. An embassy will be established on Earth within the year. Commander Zoroth will serve as our first ambassador. Zoroth, standing at the back of the chamber, felt the weight of every eye upon him. He had not expected this. He had expected to be quietly discharged, perhaps even imprisoned for his perceived failures. Instead, he was being given the most important diplomatic position in the Dominion's history. I am honored, High Counselor, he said, bowing deeply. You are qualified, Yeveth replied. You are the only one among us who truly understands what we are dealing with. You have seen the humans as they are, not as we wished them to be. That understanding will be essential in the years to come. The council session ended. The decision was made. The Velthari Dominion, for the first time in 10,000 years, had chosen peace over pride. 1 year later, Ambassador Zoroth stood on a platform overlooking the new embassy compound. The building was a blend of Velthari and human architecture, its curved walls and angular towers creating something entirely new. Around it, the human city stretched in every direction, its lights burning bright against the evening sky. Admiral Brooke stood beside him. She had aged slightly in the year since their first meeting, a few more lines around her eyes, and a touch more gray in her hair. But her gaze was as sharp as ever. You have done well, Ambassador, she said. The Council's acceptance of our terms exceeded our expectations. Zoroth inclined his head. It was not easy. There are still many in the Dominion who see this as weakness, as surrender. They do not understand what I learned during my time here. What did you learn? He considered the question carefully. I learned that strength comes in many forms. The Dominion has always measured strength in ships and weapons, in territories conquered and enemies destroyed. But the humans measure strength differently. You measure it in persistence, in adaptability, in the refusal to accept defeat no matter how overwhelming the odds. He turned to look at the Admiral directly. Your ancestors were primitive by any measure. They had no technology, no organization, no hope of surviving against a more advanced species. If our scouts had decided to act 3,000 years ago, humanity would have been destroyed without ever understanding what was happening. But they did not act, Admiral Brooks said. They waited. And in that waiting, they gave you something invaluable. Time to grow, to learn, to become what you are today. Zoroth shook his head slowly. It was the greatest mistake in our history, and I suspect it will not be the last lesson we learn from you. A shuttle descended from the sky, landing on a nearby platform. Several figures emerged, both Velthari and human, carrying documents and equipment for the ongoing negotiations. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation. The foundation of a new relationship between two species that had once been predator and prey. Lieutenant Navarra, now serving as the embassy's chief liaison officer, approached with a data tablet. Ambassador, the Coalition representatives are ready for the next session. Director Samuel Howard has arrived. Zoreth nodded. Thank you, Lieutenant. I will be there shortly. Admiral Brooks extended her hand in the human gesture of partnership. Zoreth took it, feeling the strange warmth of human skin against his own gray flesh. There is one thing I have always wanted to ask you. Admiral asked. When you first intercepted our vessel, when you saw that we had returned after 3,000 years, what did you feel? Fear? Anger? Satisfaction? Admiral Brooks considered the question. All of those things, I suppose. But mostly I felt relief. Relief? We had been waiting for so long. Preparing, building, watching the stars for any sign that someone was coming. When you finally appeared, it was almost a gift. Finally, we could prove ourselves. Finally, we could show the galaxy what humanity had become. She smiled, but there was something fierce beneath the expression. Your ancestors said we would destroy ourselves. They said we were too violent, too primitive, too flawed to ever amount to anything. But they were wrong, Ambassador. We did not destroy ourselves. We destroyed every obstacle in our path. We conquered every challenge. We built an empire that spans hundreds of worlds. And we did it all because someone somewhere said we could not. She looked up at the evening sky, where human ships moved among the stars. Never underestimate spite, Ambassador. Never underestimate the power of a species that has something to prove. Zoreth followed her gaze. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of any Velthari sensor, humanity's colonies continued to grow and expand. Their population increased with every passing year. Their technology advanced with every new discovery. And their memory of what the Dominion had once planned for them would never fade. The Velthari had returned to Earth expecting to find a dead world. A conquered species, a resource to be exploited. Instead, they had found something far more dangerous. They had found a civilization that had risen from nothing, that had turned its own flaws into strengths, that had built an empire on the foundation of pure determination. And as ambassador, Zoroth walked toward the embassy to begin another day of neg.